Hello and welcome to Capitol Review. I'm Mark Hall. President Donald Trump delivering his first address to Congress this week, and he gave an update on what his administration is doing and his vision for the future of the country. The president touted his sweeping changes, rescuing it from what he describes as destruction and mistakes left by his predecessor, Joe Biden. His speech touched on familiar topics: removing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs from the government, cracking down on immigration, and slashing the size of federal government, which he claims will help the economy.
By slashing all of the fraud, waste, and theft we can find, we will defeat inflation, bring down mortgage rates, lower car payments and grocery prices, protect our seniors, and put more money in the pockets of American families.
Meanwhile, newly elected Democratic Senator Lisa Slotkin gave the official response to the president, saying that his policies will hurt the average American.
He's on the hunt to find trillions of dollars to pass along to the wealthiest in America. And to do that, he's going to make you pay in every part of your life.
And returning to Capitol Review is Sarakshi Rai. She's the Director of Audience and Head of Social Media with our media partners at The Hill. Sarakshi, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be back.
We're always glad to have you. During President Trump's speech, he said that in his first few weeks in office has certainly been marked with swift and unrelenting action. Many are saying that he's keeping his campaign promises. Is he?
That's right, Mark. This really was a reiteration of the president relaying to the American people that he has kept most of his campaign promises. He spoke about some of the sweeping changes that have occurred under his administration. Let's not forget, we're about 45 days into his term. So this wasn't a State of the Union. This was a joint address to Congress. And really, he laid out everything his administration has done so far, from immigration, from the crackdown on DOGE, on some federal workers, to all of the policy changes he's made. He even spoke about foreign policy changes, and he even repeatedly attacked Democrats. So, we heard from the president. He spoke for 99 minutes. This was one of the longest presidential addresses to Congress in modern history. The last longest one was in 2000. So really, he spoke for a long time and addressed the American people directly. He got huge cheers and applause from the Republicans. The Democrats, on the other hand, really protested his parts of his speech and held up signs, and some even walked out. So, all in all, he really did get his message across over what his administration has been doing so far. And it really felt a lot like some of his campaign speeches, Mark.
Well, Sarakshi, you mentioned DOGE. One of the biggest reactions he got was when he started talking about their efforts. Take a listen.
I have created the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. DOGE. Perhaps you've heard of it. Perhaps. Which is headed by Elon Musk, who is in the gallery tonight. Thank you, Elon. He's working very hard. He didn't need this. He didn't need this. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Everybody here, even this side, appreciates it, I believe. They just don't want to admit that.
Sarakshi, a lot of applause from Republicans, no reaction from Democrats. Your thoughts?
That's right, Mark. Now, one of the signs that the Democrats held during the president's joint address was actually aimed at Musk and everything the Department of Government Efficiency has been doing so far, with cuts to federal aid and cuts to the federal workforce. It is, the sign read "Musk steals," and they held that up during parts of the president's speech to Congress. And really, the president made Elon Musk stand up, who was in a suit for the occasion. He was sitting in the gallery on the Republican side of the House, and he stood up and he saluted the president when he mentioned his name, and the president referred to him as the head of DOGE, while the government and the Trump administration has been very clear that he is just a special government employee and a special advisor to DOGE, and that the administrator of DOGE is actually someone else. So that was a huge moment for Elon Musk, and really reiterated that Elon Musk does have the ear of the president. He is extremely influential in his inner circle. And the president really likes what he's doing so far with the Department of Government Efficiency. There were parts of the speech where the president even called out some of the findings that DOGE had found to be errors and what the excesses of what they were paying for. So really, went to show that Elon Musk does have a mandate from the president for some of these changes.
And Sarakshi, real quick, obviously Congressman Al Green from Texas was escorted out facing censure. What's the next play for Democrats?
That's right, Mark. Well, the Democrats really haven't been able to land any punches so far. It's worth noting that the Republicans do have control of the House and the Senate as well as the White House. So essentially, the Democrats haven't really been able to land their messaging so far on some of what they say are excesses of the Trump government. So what now they're aiming to do is really try and get their message across to the American people. They've done so with Elisa Slotkin's response, where she said that American people wanted change, but not this kind of change. And she spoke about the economy and the tariffs. And really, we're going to hear a lot more from Democrats on that front, given some of the implications that the imposition of these new tariffs on Mexico and Canada will have on American people, like fuel prices rising, or the price of groceries going up, or even the price of cars going up. So we'll have to wait and see what the Democrats do. But they do need to get their messaging in order, Mark.
Sarakshi Ryan with The Hill, thank you.
Thanks for having me.